Hello again, Register audience. 32 days and counting. Yes, it's 32 days until the anniversary of Bastille Day, until the birthday of Crown Prince Victoria of Sweden, but it is also 32 days until end of support for Windows Server 2003. That's why we're here today, to work out what you're going to do about it. We assume you still have some Windows Server 2003. You'll find out later that's a pretty good bet. But we have to work out exactly what to do about it. There's not much time. So the first thing we can do about it is to find out the principle of end of support for Windows Server 2003, what it means and what the implications are for you. So of course we asked our old mates, Tony and Dale at Freeform Dynamics, to do us one of their little videos about it. And this is what they gave us. So if we can have the video, please.
My name is Dale Vile.
My name is Tony Locke.
And we're here to talk about Windows Server 2003 end of support. What does it mean and what are your options? Now, it's a bit late in the day to be talking about this, but we are picking up that there are a lot of you out there who still have these vintage servers kicking around. More of that in a minute, but to kick us off, Tony, can you take us through what end of support actually means?
Yep, certainly now. Basically, it means no more software updates will be made available by Microsoft. So no more functionality patches to fix things that are going wrong, and most importantly of all, no security patches. So any vulnerabilities identified after July 14th, Microsoft will not be providing automatically anything to help fix it. That could have implications for all of the applications that you have running on top of this, whether it's Microsoft applications or third-party ISVs. These could be really important to your business and maybe the subject to audit and compliance regulations. And if you're running on unsupported platforms, we all know what those regulations say. You might ask for audit, you're not going to pass.
And are there any particular places where you might find these old Windows servers lingering?
Absolutely. The register readers have told us that they're all over the place. Everything from Exchange and SharePoint systems through the ubiquitous file and print platforms that all users access all the time, through to some of those business applications that we just talked about. They might only have 1, 2, or 3 people running them, or potentially many hundreds, possibly thousands. And then there's the really dark, invisible side of the whole Microsoft environment, the infrastructure management solutions. There's a lot of platforms out there running things like DHCP, domain controllers, DNS, really the glue that keeps the Microsoft environment running, things that you don't really pay attention to until they stop working. And when they do stop working, everybody notices.
Can you give us a bit more sense of scale and seriousness of the issue?
It's certainly a very difficult one to quantify accurately, but numbers would tend to indicate there could be anything up to millions of Windows Server 2003 platforms still operational in business around the world, maybe even 100,000 or more in the UK alone. So the Red readership have potentially got a lot of kit out there that they need to look at. Indeed, a recent Spiceworks survey reported that 1 in every 2 organizations that they talk to, a lot of Red readers in there, have at least one Windows Server 2003 platform inside their organization. So there's a lot out there, absolutely.
So there's a big opportunity for cyber criminals, I guess.
There is indeed, and cyber criminals will almost certainly be holding back, their fire until after July the 14th on the grounds that then, they've got an open shooting season.
So you're the prey, and now you've got to decide which way to run. What are your escape routes?
You've basically got 3 options on how to move forwards. One is sort it out properly, go through the whole upgrade process, looking at upgrading the applications, the middleware, the server operating platforms themselves, whether that's internally, externally, migrating to alternative solutions, etc. Really complex, time consuming, possibly expensive, but something that you're going to have to do in the long term. There's then the option to maybe try and defer the problem. So pay Microsoft for extended support. They'll certainly take your money, but again, they're not going to want to do that forever, and nor are you. So look to potentially isolate and lock things down. If you know you've got a Windows Server 2003 platform out there, but it's not actually connected to the internet, it's maybe locked away in a cupboard with no connectivity whatsoever, great, fine. If it is connected, then trying to secure such platforms can be complex, certainly time consuming, and it's going to keep you busy for the foreseeable future, just making sure that everything keeps working there. And finally, there's a sort of halfway house, which is to implement something called virtual patching. It's not really patching the operating system itself, but creating a shell that's wrapped around it that can control anything coming in and out, so that when you have identified any vulnerabilities in the platform, you can try and mitigate that by essentially traffic management and lots of security that's automatically provided maybe by a third party rather than you doing it yourself on top. There is, of course, the option to do nothing, but that's probably not a really good idea in this instance.
So you need to figure out where you are and what to do about it, and I'm guessing that's what your life cycle diagram is about here.
It is indeed. The first one, as the Register audience have heard me say time after time, is go out there and do some discovery. Find out exactly what Server 2003 you've got running, what are the services sitting on top of it, what applications are involved, what are the business consequences of anything happening to those platforms. Then once you've identified that, do some assessment and planning. So what are the options we have for either, discontinuing the service completely or migrating it off? And working out how quickly you can do that, how you're going to move forward inside to a new platform, outside to some hosted services or cloud option, managed services potentially. But then again, you need to do this relatively quickly. So getting those long-term solutions, migrating off the platform completely is clearly the best possible solution for most scenarios. But getting there by July 14th, unless you're really well down the road already, might be tricky. So therefore, look at doing some sort of interim solution that will keep you safe post July 14th and give you time to get to that longer term area where everything's fine going forwards.
And what would you say to those who are just going to cross their fingers and hope?
I would say certainly very good luck, as the slide says.
Well, it sounds to me as if they're going to need it. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Dale.
Well, that's pretty good stuff, wasn't it? That's terrific. And a little bit scary as well, wasn't it? Now, remember, if you've got any questions for our panel today, then do ask the questions. Ask the questions while we're here in the studio. You ask them, they come up on my little screen here. I ask them to the guys, and you'll get an answer for them. You'll get a straight answer from our panel today, because we have experts. And our first expert today, you've already heard him on the video. Tony, good work again.
Thank you very much for being here, Tim.
Welcome back to the studio. I do remember we were here last year talking about the same subject.
Absolutely.
And saying this is really the last time at which you can start your project.
Yes, because these sort of projects, as we just said, take a long time. They're complex, so you've got to start now, and that was last year. So clearly, if you haven't started yet, got to look for it. Either a time machine would be good. If the Reg readers can give us one of those, then there's a big.
But we have got practical information today. It won't all just be, no. I'm sorry, you've missed the boat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. And also from Trend Micro today. First time in the studio, James?
Absolutely. Good morning.
Good morning. Do you like our studio? You enjoying yourself so far?
Do you know, it's very nice. No, it's been very good.
It's surprisingly
well looked
roomy.
after.
Yeah. Good. Well, that's good. Well, let's see what happens in the next little while. Now, tell me, what do you do at Trend Micro?
So I'm a pre-sales consultant at Trend Micro. I've been there 7 years. So my primary remit is to look after our mid and enterprise customers in a sort of pre-sales engagement, making sure they understand what our technologies can do and how we can help.
And you're doing a lot of this at the moment, then, are you?
Absolutely. There's a lot of discussions around how customers can deal with their legacy infrastructure and protect it while they think of a plan of how to deal with upgrading it.
And an interesting thing for me as well is, as we were just talking before, in years past we'd have had some kind of IT consultancy organisation, in talking about this, a system integrator or something talking about this. Now we've got security people in talking about this. Things have changed when it comes to end of support, haven't they?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the applications are required by the business. The fundamental issue with not upgrading are the risks associated with vulnerabilities that can't be patched or won't be patched by Microsoft. As a security company, we have technologies that can help mitigate those risks.
Don't spoil the surprise.
No, that's it. So
Yeah.
I think that's where, from our point of view, is trying to explain to customers there are other things you can do rather than rushing through a migration which is maybe not well tested, spending ridiculous amounts of money with Microsoft which is unnecessary, and there are other ways to do things.
Good stuff. Just very quickly before we get going, a quick question from Sarah, who's asking, will this be available to view again? Yes, it will. You might, for some of you, you will already be viewing this again on the on-demand. We will also be splitting it up into the sections. First of all, you'll have the analysis, Tony and Dale's piece. Secondly, there will be our discussion about the principles, about what you should be doing and how you make choices. And third, we're letting James explain exactly what Trend does about this.
A message from the sponsor.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, I'm going to let you have my clicker today.
Thank you very much.
Because
I feel quite honoured.
Thank
So
you.
that's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. So
Almost the first time ever that.
Yeah.
So James, take us. First of all, we've got to get through. We've got to look at what the options are on this now. With 32 days and counting, there are not many options on the table. Let's find out what they are.
Absolutely. And you've seen from Tony's introduction that obviously there's a very short amount of time. Either you migrate or you look at mitigating controls to protect holes that will appear within your operating system. I think we've also got to bear in mind that this is not a simple task, and I hope that everyone is already well down their planning and the migration. I think we've all had experience with previous end of supports. XP being the most recent one. There are still many customers with XP, and that's on the client side, and that's a much easier upgrade path.
XP was child's play.
Absolutely.
This,
so we're talking about infrastructure. We could be running your domain controllers, your Active Directory, your DNS. It's not a simple task to go and upgrade those. Yeah. So you've got to plan properly. Applications that are sitting on top of that, they may be very critical to the business. There's not a simple just upgraded to 2012. It might not run on 2012. You might need to find specialist software engineers to be able to come in and re-engineer that. You might not be able to find those people. They may no longer exist.
They're quite busy at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. So you are going to have to look at obviously doing the low-hanging fruit in terms of migrating those, but there's going to be some difficult applications where you're going to have to think long and hard about how you deal with it. Whether it's buying in new applications, actually asking the business whether it's really required. Mm-hmm. But those are the things you've got to really start looking at. Okay. And I think the other difficult thing to contend with is we're not just dealing with this end of support. We've seen a big increase in breaches within organisations. The reality is traditional security is no longer enough to protect you. It's quite easy to bypass it. So you're dealing with how do I enhance my environment to protect my assets? How do I deal with all of the other risk and management initiatives that I'm having to drive to deal with new regulation, to deal with new threats, but also on top of that now dealing with the Windows Server 2003 end of life, which is a real strain on resources and budget, and you've got to prioritise, and it's not always it's not a simple task. If it was easy, everyone would do it, wouldn't they? So
yes, we wouldn't be doing this. We'd just be saying, congratulations, everyone, you've already done it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think when we start to look at what's really the situation out there, in a recent survey we did with an organisation. Only 17% of organisations had actually finished migrating their 2003 servers. Everyone else had some or many 2003 servers still in their estate at various points in that migration process. Still an awful lot of work to be done by people. And I think
the tricky thing for this is, Tony, isn't it? From your experience, people just don't know what they have.
People don't know, yes. They simply have a very bad picture of what platforms they have running and exactly what versions of software they're running. And so therefore, without that knowledge, it's hard to move forward. Yeah. And a lot of it is that invisible infrastructure stuff that you don't notice until it really doesn't work. And then everybody notices and the alarms go off. Your phone starts ringing like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Why didn't you spot this? Because it was controlling everything. Well, because it's been doing that untouched for
it's working.
When I arrived, there was blinking lights under the desk. I thought just keep the power on and let it carry on.
Absolutely. Whose job is this? Yeah. The person who left a few years ago is his
absolutely.
job. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good.
So I think there's also a view of why not just simply upgrade? Well, it's really not that simple, and we've discussed some of those already. But there's regulations that need to be taken into account. There's the applications themselves. How were they custom developed? They're not off-the-shelf applications, so do you need a new engineering team? It takes time to evaluate new applications. Mm-hmm. Get the business owner or the application owner in the business to evaluate, is it fit for purpose? That can take a very long time, especially when there's other initiatives and other priorities going on in the business which are taking precedent, and it's difficult.
The other big thing with Server 2003 is that a lot of the applications have been running on it, for more than a decade. Mm-hmm. And some of the ISVs that actually created that software, they don't exist anymore. So there is no current version to migrate to. So you've got to do something, but getting the business to buy into that and change is a political issue sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. To be entirely, just to be straight about this, we are saying, if your plan now is we've got a month left, we're going to just upgrade everything, you're saying this is a foolish decision to make.
You're unfortunately too late in that, too late to the party when it comes to that now.
That's good. We were saying that we're more or less too late last year, weren't we? And
we were saying that last year you really needed to start
now
to make sure that you could do it. If you try and go from 0 to completely upgraded by July the 14th, I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
By June the 14th, it'd be impossible. But July the 14th is hard. Really hard.
On the on-demand.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I get what you get on this is, but people are busy, and this is the thing that slips to the back of your mind.
That's the other thing. Yeah, I mean, we've always got something else to do. The reg readers tell us all the time that they are really worked all hours of the day. So fitting in something like an upgrade project that maybe the business doesn't see the reasons to do now, it's working. Leave it alone.
Yeah, the best you could do is do something that nobody notices. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So, good. So this is actually what the migration plans are, though.
Well, yeah, so I thought this is some quite interesting data, and it's also some scary data here. So, while the majority, nearly 3/4 of customers that were surveyed are going to upgrade their on-premise 2003 to 2012.
That's the thing that we just said that wasn't possible to do. Okay,
good. And then a lot are now embracing the cloud, Microsoft Azure, Amazon, and other hosted data center providers. But I think the most, I suppose for me, scary, I think, is that 1 in 4, 25% of those polled said there are servers they will not migrate and they will continue to run them.
Okay.
So that's 1 in 4 businesses are going to have some sort of compensating controls, mitigation to protect those servers while they're still running those applications.
Again, to be entirely specific, if you just run your server, carry on running your server and pretend nothing's happening, what will happen?
Well, you've got to be really confident that it can't be accessed from the outside world, even indirectly. Somebody coming in.
A lot of these servers are in exactly the sort of places where they are.
Well, they may not be directly addressable from the outside world, but are they addressable from inside the organisation?
Yeah.
Answer's yes, which means that someone only has to get a breach into a platform inside your organisation, a PC, a laptop, something like that. These things happen all the time, the audience tell us. So therefore, that would give a route into your Active Directory system, your DHCP.
So you come and do your pre-sales job with me, James, and I say, listen, it's great. I've got loads of these, but there's one that I'm just going to leave. I'll do nearly all of them, but I'm going to leave one because that's quite difficult. What would you say to me?
I would be concerned because that is an ideal ground for hackers that get access to the network, maybe not directly to that initially, but they will get at it's very easy to social engineer someone to get access to their computer and then laterally move across, use an exploit that hasn't been protected on that server to then open a backdoor, which then I can get access to whenever I want, and attack the rest of your environment. It may not be something you see visible. They're very clandestine in how they behave, and they will sit there for months, maybe even years, collecting information, understanding your environment, and ultimately exfiltrating what they feel is valuable, or utilising your organisation to store and distribute content, or even use your organisation to attack other organisations. So
I get the feeling you've had this conversation.
It's quite even one machine can be compromised, and that's
you're only as strong as your weakest link. And it's impossible to keep everything secure all the time. That's the audience know that. They tell us that all the time when we ask them.
Absolutely, yeah, good. And it's I'd be interested actually for any of the audience, if any of you gone through this process and have worked out exactly where you still have. Did you get any surprises about where your Windows Server 2003 is? Because I imagine there are also some people watching today who just haven't looked yet and are thinking maybe I've got one or two. I'm interested in anyone who's actually gone through this process recently and found what exactly they've found. So if you have got the information and you want to share it with us, we'll keep your names out of it. So good, yes, carry on.
So the number one risk which we bang on about is though the vulnerabilities that are found, and they already exist.
Yeah.
But when someone finds them, they become public knowledge. They might already be exploited by certain groups who've done the work, but once it becomes public, every man and his dog will try, who's got some sort of reason to try and attack your organisation, or organisations will try and use that to get in. So you've got to deal with that vulnerability, and this is where we start to look at what are the options. What can organisations do to compensate that Microsoft will no longer support that as standard. So I suppose this is where we can start to talk about what other things that can be done. And the first one and the easiest one, unfortunately, it's also probably the most expensive one and longer term probably most unrealistic, is looking to Microsoft for an extended support.
So you're talking about what, 40, 50 quid a year?
Yeah,
something like that?
Try sticking quite a few zeros on the end of that, and that's an entry level.
Okay.
But it could be, bigger organisations could be looking at, double-digit millions to support, large environments. So,
Are people actually going to buy this, Tony?
That really depends on how important these servers are to them.
Yeah.
If they're that important, if they're worth the money, then maybe they will. But it's going to be a very, very, very small number that's going to be able to make that business case.
Yeah.
Making business cases to do anything is hard. Making a business case for this stuff that you should have done already, which is the way the people in charge of the budgets will see it, is going to be almost impossible
it's going to be
for
a
most
difficult
people
meeting,
to make. It's going to be a very
Yeah.
difficult
Yeah.
meeting. I wouldn't like to have it.
No.
and that's just year one, and as year 2, 3, and so on go, that is only going to increase because Microsoft, they don't want to support it anymore. It's not in their interest. They've got to spend engineering resource on the new OS, is not the old one, so they're gonna make it impossible for you to carry on.
So this is not only not a short-term plan; it's an even worse plan in the long term.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't even get to the long term. In the medium term, it will be financially wrecking, even for big companies.
Okay. Yeah. Don't tell the shareholders. Okay. Good. So we have some other bad ideas on this slide. Do we?
Yeah. So then there's let's look at the network.
Yeah.
What can we do on the network side? What can we do with our firewalls? What can we do to lock them down? What can we do with our network-based IPS to potentially protect those vulnerabilities from external? Doesn't necessarily cover internal attacks, but there's things that can be done, but it can be complex, it can be costly, and it's not necessarily going to give you the complete security or protection you would need, unfortunately. I mean, maybe Tony, you've got some things to add to that.
Well, the other thing is that when you start, changing your network edge devices, that's complex.
Yeah.
And it can often lead to service interruptions, which again, your users don't like. It might even open up other things because you're not quite sure what you're doing. So it's really tricky area to go that way.
Tony used to do this for a living before he got...
A long time ago.
Yeah.
Decades ago.
But you still wake up in the night screaming.
I do, shaking, yes, all the time.
Okie doke. So again, we're saying it's a possible, but not great.
It's not great. I think the best of all evils is to look at how do I lock down that server? What controls can I put on the server? And I say best of all evils outside of migrating to a supported operating system. And really we're looking at how can I utilize what's already on the server, what additional software components can I add to the server to add the controls that I'm going to need to be able to mitigate the risks that are going to come from the support no longer being there. So looking at locking down what applications can run on those servers. In terms of the malware protection, a lot of malware engines will stop supporting 2003, so you need to make sure that the vendor you have as your anti-malware supplier can give you extended support for new malicious software that's going to exploit or run on 2003 server.
And is the price of that going to go up as well?
Not generally. I'd say this will for those companies that understand customers' environments, that they will continue to support that for a reasonably long period without looking at leveraging additional costs on the customer. So, but we're talking many years. It will go up, but I think in the short term, I think there's plenty out there that will continue to support that. The other, I suppose, for me, is probably the most important is the virtual patching. So, virtual patching, it sounds like patching, but it does it virtually. And the way it does it, rather than in the traditional sense of patching, where a software bug would be fixed by adding new software to it, it's done by utilizing what we call host-based intrusion prevention technology. So it's intrusion prevention technology, which usually sits in the network or on the gateway, actually being on each network stack of the server, and it will protect network-based attacks that are trying to exploit that vulnerability from getting access to that machine to exploit it. And that, if done in the right way, where it's fully automated, and you as customers don't have to work out which rules to deploy, and it's all done in the background and it all happens automatically, it can be an incredibly valuable technology because it means you can still continue to run that OS, and even the applications on there which are not patched but protect those and reduce the risk associated with not having that patch.
It's a good idea, Tony.
It's a good idea. The other thing that you really need to complement that, though, is good monitoring to make sure that what's happening on that server is under control and that you know when changes are happening and what those changes are and whether they should be happening. So getting enhanced monitoring on the platform as well is really important to complement everything.
I see. So there is an investment in that as well, in getting
potentially
getting up to speed on that. Perhaps, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I think we all realise that this is a massive headache. Mm-hmm. There is no quick fix from a migration perspective. We can help to give you an extended opportunity to go and migrate, but you can't just forget about it. You have to either migrate or you have to look at compensating controls.
So make a decision now.
You've got to make a decision.
Come up with a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't migrated, you're not going to do it in time. Not if you're going to not put any risk on the business. But you can look at mitigating controls that can be rolled out relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. Far quicker than migrating the application, especially if there's difficulty in finding an OS that they can run on. It is possible. I think that the key thing is to make sure that as a somebody who's, I suppose, involved in the security element, in the managing the infrastructure, to make sure you have a plan, you're working with the stakeholders, and you understand the implications of running or not running this application.
Well, yeah, because we asked you to come up with some steps for this, haven't we? So we, on this. So this is the plan.
So this is a summary plan. There's lots of information out there. You've got some on our website. There's lots of Microsoft. There's a lot of organisations are offering advice. So I've taken what I believe is sort of the best short and sweet version of the steps you need to take to ensure that you're doing the right thing. So the first one is, and as Tony said at the beginning, is you've got to understand where it is. What is my estate made up of? Where are my Windows 2000 already servers? That's the first thing. Then is to look at the applications themselves. So what are the applications running on there? Are they running my entire Active Directory environment? Mm-hmm. That's a very big project. And if you are still in that situation, you're not going to make the deadline. Mm-hmm. But other applications that are running on top of 2003, what are they doing for the business? What are the dependencies? What are the migration options? Is it a simple one that the application is a public application that's still being updated and it's a simple just upgrade it? Is it that we need to identify some software engineers to actually fix and update the application so it can run on a later operating system? Those are very important. But first of all, you've got to understand who's the owner, what is the application being used for? Is it
actually being used at all? Because quite often you have somebody using an application maybe once a year, twice a year, but everybody else is using another application all the time. So could they migrate off it and just close that application down? Is it actually used at all? These are some things that people find quite surprising. We've kept that server running. We don't know why, but we might be able to switch it off, but we've never really had the nerve or the reason to try and switch it off.
You don't know.
And that's the problem
with
not knowing.
And see what happens.
See who complains. See who complains.
See who calls support.
Okay. So I mean, this is. If you make a sensible plan, a bad plan or a plan with unpalatable options is better than no plan at all.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Burying your head in the sand is not the right way to go.
And at least it gives you the opportunity to put that plan in front of the powers that be so that they get their name against the minute saying we decided to do nothing.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I think that's you can't go to the board and ask for money without a plan because they want to understand the risks, because everything is a balance. How much do I spend to alleviate this potential risk? And this is just going to be another one of those. So
and you got some mitigation options here as well.
Yeah, so I think the important thing is to remember that once you've identified those applications, there's going to be some that are easy to migrate. Those that aren't, you need to understand how you're going to do that. And I think we've covered that in enough detail. But in terms of mitigation controls, we covered those earlier. But the three main ones are ensuring you've got an anti-malware engine that can protect you or identify and protect you from malicious software that's going to take advantage of that operating system, making sure that you stop vulnerabilities being exploited using some sort of virtual patching technology, and then to understand any change that might happen. So where a machine has been compromised and changes are happening, making sure you're quickly alerted to that. And that would be using things like file integrity monitoring technology or log inspection technologies that can run and pull out specific alerts or highlight any specific changes like registry changes or application changes that happen on that device.
Now, we're going to be talking about virtual patching in more detail in the next section, the way that you do it. But a general question about this has come in for us, actually. For some people will be thinking, that's an interesting idea, and we described it in some brief detail. So the question is, do you see it as having a longer term role rather than just this particular tactical version of virtual patching that we're using? Is it something that we're going to be seeing more of?
So, I mean, virtual patching, let's move away from 2003 for the moment, but if we look to all of the existing operating systems, whether it's Microsoft, Linux, or whatever, every application has vulnerabilities, and they can be patches can be quickly created, and they can take a long time. Often in the server environment, it's not a simple matter of just rolling out the patch. They need to be tested because they might impact the server. They might be mission critical servers that can't be taken offline to be rebooted. So having a mitigating control for the day-to-day is also very, very useful across your existing estate, both on the server and client side. I wouldn't say it replaces in that environment, it doesn't replace the patch, because at some point you've still got a patch. But for legacy systems, it is a great control to ensure that you cannot be...
Something to have in your toolkit.
Something to have in your toolkit. But it's not just a tool for legacy systems, it's a tool for existing applications and operating systems.
The idea that you can just stack up all your patches and do them once in your change window, that you might get once a month, once a quarter, whatever, is wonderful in theory, but of course it does have a security risk impact. So unless you can do something like this to give you the opportunity to delay actually implementing all of the patches, might be useful for some organisations.
That's what everybody did, wasn't
well,
it?
Yeah, exactly. But now you know that the rate exploits come along at, you're likely to be exploited unless you've got something in place to stop it happening. So either you implement the patches really quickly, which can be in change management terms for those business critical systems really difficult, or you find some way to give yourself again a breathing window to actually make it in a control change.
Yeah. Lovely. Okay, good. Yeah, good question. Thank you. More like that, please. So great, right? That wraps up the generality of making a plan. These are your options. Now, specifically, you're here because you have a recommendation, a way, a thing.
Yes.
And so this is your thing, but give us the argument as to why what you do at Trend Micro, you think that it's a good idea.
So we've been in the security industry 26 years. That's our sole remit in life as a company, is to protect our customers' environments, to keep the bad guys out, keep your data safe, keep your people safe, keep your reputation safe as well. I mean, that's very important. This is an ideal opportunity for the bad guys to take advantage of Microsoft no longer supporting an operating system, which most businesses, as we've seen, will not only have but still continue to run. So we think as a business, obviously we want to sell stuff to be in business, but actually we want to help. I feel I sleep well at night because I know we're here to help, and I want to make sure that, or we want to as an organisation make sure everyone understands there are other options around how to protect yourself in these type of situations. So the technology I'm going to talk about today is called Deep Security. It's a server security platform with multiple different controls. I suppose historically it has also supported organisations with Windows 2000, even NT, and XP migration, but also on the day-to-day helps all organisations deal with vulnerabilities that come up all the time, like Heartbleed, Poodle, Shellshock, where these were big impact vulnerabilities that if you didn't have technology like virtual patching, which was literally an instant push the rule out to the whole estate, there was a lot of work, a lot of overtime, a lot of business impact while systems were being upgraded. And in some instances, it took months for the vendors to get out patches to fix the SSL issues, for example. So, from a deep security perspective, it is a single solution that covers both physical, traditional servers, where there might be quite a few 2003 just haven't migrated or virtualized. We also support servers that are in virtual environments, whether that's VMware or Hyper-V, but also server instances that exist within cloud-based environments as well. So you've got a single view of all of your server instances and the protection that sits on top of those. And I say it's not just a virtual patching. There's an anti-malware capability with web reputation. There's a capability to do file integrity monitoring and log inspection to give you a view of any changes that happen on those environments. So you can utilize it across your existing non-2003 estate and use it to extend your opportunity to migrate properly with your server 2003 estate.
Okay, so we're not saying this is a thing to use for in the next 32 days and then and then a few weeks after that get rid of it.
I mean, you've still got a plan to make sure that you upgrade at some stage or end of life, because it's not something you really want to run with forever.
No.
Apart from that, your hardware is going to die one day, so you're going to have to do something eventually.
Yeah. Surprising how long it lasts, isn't it?
It is these days, yes. It keeps on going and going and going.
Okay.
So I mean, just to go over virtual patching again, just so everyone understands what it is. It's not software that we write to install into your application. It's there is a software component from Trend which does all the security controls, but it's just it's an IPS rule that is used to block that vulnerability being exploited. So any vulnerabilities that we find out about in the wild, we will write a rule to protect that within your environments. And as a general rule, 2 to 6 hours of something becoming public, we will deliver a rule. We have an SLA of 48 hours, but generally it's much quicker than that. Mm-hmm. So that's an awful lot quicker than most patches become delivered in, let alone the fact that there will be no more patches for 2003 unless you pay for extended support. So that in itself is very powerful, but then all the other additional controls around the anti-malware piece and the system security with the file integrity monitoring, having that all in a single console, single package. And one of the other important things to this is an automated solution. So
I was going to say the automation is the fundamental part of
I think if we think about the workload associated with managing your security and manually implementing policy is very difficult. So we integrate all of our deep security management console integrates into things like Active Directory. It integrates into vCenter, the Amazon Cloud interface, your Microsoft Azure interface. So any instances that you create, so let's say you spin up a new server in VMware, it will automatically deploy your anti-malware policy, your FIM policy, file integrity monitoring policy, your HIPS or your virtual patching policy. And that is all automated based on the so it massively reduces the overhead of managing your server security, which is, but doesn't just do it for one control, it does it across multiple controls.
This guy on the slide looks a bit like you, doesn't he?
A little bit.
Yeah,
a younger version maybe.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was like before you had to, before you had to do Windows Server 2003 end of support. Wasn't it?
Yeah, that's
that was
true,
before you got given this project. Yeah. But okay, so there is a certain amount of investment around this, Tony, in the sort of like the attitude to being able to use this effectively, get the automation in place, make sure that it's done throughout the organisation.
Sure. Yeah. But in truth, the Register audience have told us repeatedly over the last 2 or 3 years that more automation is absolutely what they want, because they're doing too much anyway, and the more we can automate of the stuff that we don't need to actually manage ourselves manually is something that is very welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, this is for we got Windows Server 2003 end of support coming on. You see this as a technology that will be able to that will be useful when end of support comes along on other devices as well.
Absolutely,
operating systems.
Absolutely. In the same way, we will continue to support legacy operating systems with new anti-malware signatures, new IPS or virtual patching rules as well. So that's part of the solutions, as well as protecting your existing infrastructure. So it's not a tool you just put in for the next 30 days. It's something you learn to live with, and actually it adds so much value, not in just terms of securing your environment, but freeing up resources to do other projects, because it automates your security within your environment and gives you that peace of mind across multiple security controls. So yeah.
Tony, we've had a few years of security companies, close your ears, So we had a few years as a security company telling us that the sky's going to fall on our heads, and then it sort of doesn't. And people have become a little bit cynical about this. Where's this on that scale?
It's really difficult to say. It's clearly the sky's not going to fall on everybody's head, but some people will be impacted unless they do something about it. That's just the nature of the beast. You know, there are enough Windows Server 2003 boxes out there that someone, and potentially lots of someones, are going to get hit by people targeting them. You know, if I was a malware writer looking to target 2003 with any attack, I would have just saved up all of my new attacks, you know, until after July the 14th. You know, why expend it beforehand? It's a complete and utter waste of my effort. So therefore, optimizing my own business, you wait. So the likelihood is that there's a whole bunch of stuff just waiting to hit the streets on July the 15th. You know, like the fireworks on the Bastille Day. You know, that's going to happen. So then, you're confident that you can do something about that? What's the impact for you? It's getting back to that cataloging in the assessment. What are my platforms? What are they running? How important are they? You know, what do we need to do to secure them? Is everything going to fall over and completely go down? No. Could your brand be impacted? Yes. And you know, you mentioned brand earlier. When we talk to security guys out there, IT guys out there, it's usually the case in most organizations that the thing that they're really, really paranoid about is not so much, you know, losing data or a security breach per se. It's the potential for it to impact their brand negatively. You know, and that's been the case ever since I was in IT, you know, decades ago. And that's not going to change anytime soon. So just protecting that brand is really important. And just having damage there, you know, can really impact how much money the company gets in the next few years if customers are put off. So is the sky going to fall in and everybody going to go completely out of business? No. Is somebody going to get damaged by this? Quite possibly.
Absolutely. I think we've got to remember that, you know, it's just because this is end of support and there will be vulnerabilities, won't be patched. Existing applications that do have patches written for them don't always get implemented, so they're still vulnerable. And I think, you know, about reputation, at the moment, we all comply to the UK Data Protection Act from a personal identifiable information perspective. There's new regulation coming out of Europe, which is the EU General Data Protection Regulation, which is going to supersede that, which will require a forced disclosure element of any loss of personal identifiable information. At the moment, we don't have to. But that means that you are going to have to publicly go out to those affected and to the Information Commissioner's Office to say, you know, we've had a breach and this is who's affected. And so there's going to be more and more businesses that, you know, are going to be concerned about ensuring they don't have a breach because they don't want to have their name dragged through the mud.
And you're also going to have to ensure that you know if you've had a breach. And at the moment, most people don't know until way down the line.
It's usually the third party that says.
So that's when it gets really interesting.
And yes, as an excuse, I was asleep at the wheel when Windows Server 2003 went to end of support. That's not really a good.
The judges tend not to like that one very much.
All right, so let's sum this one up then. If we were to give people 3 things to go off and do now, right at the end of this, straight away, that they could get done today, this is your challenge. Who's going to take the first one?
It's the obvious one that we've done already. You know, go out and find out what Server 2003
How do you
you've
do
got.
this, Tony? How do you do this?
You do some sort of inventory discovery. There's lots of tools to help you do that.
So if you don't have one, download one.
If you don't have one, download one. There are several available, you know, freely from respectable companies.
And so within
not just malware writers.
So within minutes, you've done your inventory discovery. Thing 2, then, in that case.
Understand what are the applications running and how do they impact my business and who owns them and why they're being used. So just that understanding of your applications.
Make a big spreadsheet, basically, isn't
absolutely.
it? And your columns on the spreadsheet are the thing that I've got, and who I contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you should be able to categorise the risk on this.
Yeah, you might be able to do it on your own. You might have to go to the business and say, hey guys, you know, what's this app actually doing?
Yeah.
You know, and how important is it? Can we switch it off? Can we mitigate it? Or are you going to take the blame if something happens?
That's going to take a couple of hours during the afternoon, isn't it, to get through that?
Could be an interesting political one, but it's something that you've got to get in place. I mean, if only to cover your own back, never mind actually helping the business move forward.
You're very much of the mind that this is time to have that conversation then.
I
and
think
to say
this
to
is,
them, you can't use this anymore.
Yeah, you can't say that we didn't know if I've just told you.
Yes.
You've got to do something.
Yeah.
Slope your shoulder.
Yeah. Thing 3, then, in that case, this is your final thing.
It's that execution, that action plan and executing. So that is either migrating those that can, getting other applications replaced or updated, or putting in mitigating controls. And that is, you've got to do something. You do all the planning, but then you've got to action it and
you can get rid of some, as we were talking, I hate the phrase low-hanging fruit, but I've just said it. But you can get rid of a lot of stuff quite quickly, I would have thought, and then really concentrate on the difficult bits.
So give yourself a time window to work on the difficult stuff. Do the easy stuff quickly, get it out the way, off the books, and then look at, well, okay, we know we need to tackle this. Let's put a proper plan in place and make sure that the business is aware of, what not doing something means, so that they can actually put their names on the block against responsibility for it. Because otherwise, if we don't tell the business, then the business will always blame IT.
Yeah.
If they don't want to fund it, if they don't want to put the resources and the time and effort into working it out themselves with IT, then you've got to get them to take responsibility for doing nothing.
Final question then. If they're going down this virtual patching route, your virtual patching route, how long does that take from the time they make the decision to the time that they can relax?
It depends on their environment, but relatively quickly. I mean, they're obviously going to have to have an evaluation period, but that could make part of the, can move into an acquisition. But as long as the environment is ready, I mean, you can deploy within a few days. You can get it up and running. But they're depending on the environment. So VMware environments, depending on how you want to do, there's some prerequisite requirements. But generally, it's a relatively quick deployment.
I was going to say, because we don't have time to organise another Regcast to say it's now 2 days until end of support. What are you going to do? That would be an interesting Regcast, actually. It's a short one. Yeah,
it's an interesting one if we do it 2 days after end of support. Say, what's happened, guys?
You can all come back and vote.
Yeah, they'll be able to watch it. For some reason, our computers aren't working. Guys, thank you very much. James, thank you for coming in and doing this. Tony, thank you for coming in again, and thank you for your excellent introductory video at the beginning, which I enjoy hearing. It means I can hear you anytime I want.
It's the dulcet tones of Dale and myself. It sends everybody to sleep.
You're quite a double act. Anyway, thank you very much, guys. Thank you as well, Register audience, for watching us today and for your questions. And remember that if you want to watch this again, you can, as many times as you want. And also there might be some things that you want to send around to someone else coming from this. Please complete our survey as well and let us know what you think. And because at the Register, we do more of the things you want and less of the things you don't want, but you have to tell us that first. Meanwhile, from the Register, I've been Tim Phillips, and goodbye.